Okay, if you are fishing still water, especially high mountain lakes and reservoirs, you need to know some really good damsel patterns. So today we're going to review the top 5, for now, damsel patterns when I go out on still water.
Dude, that's a big brown, bro.
Okay, today we are out fishing a high elevation, I think we're at 10,000 feet or so, lake. And one of the patterns, or one of the hatch matchy things that we're seeing, are a few damsels here and there. Now, it's first part of August, so this is not what I would call prime damsel time. But case in point, I have caught some fish on damsels today, even though I'm not seeing a ton of them. So that's one thing that I figured we wanted to chat about today. And that is, when you are fishing a damsel hatch or you want to imitate damsels, what are my favorite 5 damsel patterns? Now, there's literally hundreds of damsel patterns, and so I'm not going to say these are the absolute best, but if these are ones, when I said I'm coming up to fish this lake, these are the first 5 that I pulled from my box. And we'll go through each one. I'll tell you how to fish them. And the last one is kind of an interesting one because it's not the type of damsel fly or damsel pattern that you're used to fishing. Anyway, so we're going to talk about these 5 damsel patterns, and also I'm going to talk about how to fish them. I will say that generally when I'm fishing still water, but specifically damsels, I'm going to be fishing a 10-foot 6-weight rod, even if I'm dealing with a little smaller fish, because I like to deal with my specialty lines. In this case, I have a midge tip. We love midge tips. They are very, very effective in damsel hatches because you can basically vary the weight of the pattern, and we'll talk about that on a couple of the patterns. The importance of having no weight or some weight. And the midge tip, which is a floating running line, and also comes in like a hover version, which is a slightly intermediate sink line, and then a slightly heavier sink tip. In this case, this is floating, and then it has a 6-foot section that's about 1.5 inches per second, which is essentially a sink tip intermediate. And then from there, I'll usually use 2 to 3 patterns, depending on how deep the fish are. If I'm fishing damsels specifically, say above weed beds, then sometimes I may even just use a full floating line and use a washing line method to fish these, which would essentially involve a dry fly on your point. Anyway, so we're going to get into these patterns and specifically how to fish them. We also have tutorials for these patterns, and shocker, they happen to be also on our website. If you do like them assembled, you can buy them. We'll provide the links below. If you like them unassembled and want to tie them on your own, we'll also provide a link to some of the tutorials that we have for these flies so that you can tie them and make your own little variations. Because like I said, a lot of times with these damsel patterns, you are going to need to adjust the weight by virtue of, say, bead or foam or nothing at all, in order to get those damsels where you want them, where the fish are targeting, and where you're going to have the best luck fishing. Anyway, let's get into it. Okay, coming in at number 1. This is one of my favorite fly patterns overall because I designed it and it's mine. And it's called the belly flop balanced damsel. This is made with a spectrumized dubbing of my own mixing. If you do buy them pre-assembled through Fulling Mill, which makes this fly, then you don't have to mix your own dubbing. But if you do want to tie them, we'll have a link for all these flies that have tutorials down below. But the belly flop balanced damsel does have a specific dubbing mix. I would highly recommend you use it. Now with this one, what I like about it is, number 1, it's a balanced fly. And so you can fish it under an indicator quite nicely. You can fish it on a strip. And the cool thing about that is that I have the underbody specifically, so it's a mylar, but I barber pull the dubbing loop essentially so that that underbody shines through. When it's wet, it kind of pulls that dubbing back against the underbody, so it's shiny enough to grab attention, but still have the appearance of what a natural damsel nymph would look like. So the way I would fish that, like I mentioned, either on an indicator because it is going to be balanced, or I've also used stripping with like a midge tip or even a sweep line or an intermediate, and just pull them. The one thing about this is it does have a bead, a tungsten bead on there. So if you, as a lot of damsel hatches will kind of find their way closer to the surface, that fly there can get really quickly too deep. So as we go through all these flies, it's important that you understand the depth that you need to be at in order to be where the fish are eating the damsels. Okay, so number 2, and this is another great damsel. This is called the Zacatec damsel. And this damsel is unweighted. And I like unweighted patterns. It also has some ostrich herl on the body. The reason I like unweighted damsel patterns is because there's going to be, for the most part, you're going to find during damsel hatches, the fish are feeding in like 6 inches of water. And I would also like to point out I have a nice pointer stick for all these flies that I found here up in the mountains. It's almost like a wand. Anyway, so we're just making do. I just realized I didn't introduce you to my stick. Anyway, Zacatec damsel and any other unweighted damsel, I think you have to have unweighted. In fact, this would apply for chironomids, scuds, any calabatus, any of the stillwater stuff that we're using, because as you work your way up the water column, a lot of these bugs are going to inhabit at different times of the year, different layers of the water. The fish will also feed on them during different times of the year, different times of the day. So you don't want to be fishing with a beadhead when the fish are chomping on damsels 2 to 6 inches beneath the surface. So this Zacatec damsel is phenomenal if you're just going to be, like, say, casting a floating line over a weed bed and you want your fly to just kind of remain in that top foot or so of water. Now, going along with that, I also like to have lightly weighted patterns. And so our next pattern is we'll call it a new version of a balanced damsel. This is the micro balanced damsel, another one from Fulling Mill. This is jig style, and it has a much smaller bead. So this damsel I would use if I needed the fly to get down, maybe not as quickly, but I still need it to sink. Now, this fly has been designed to work with the bung, the drop back bung from Fulling Mill. It's a type of strike indicator. And so those come in different weights, which is also good because then, again, you can control the speed at which the fly sinks. You can control the depth a little bit better. And also this one is easier to cast. It's smaller form factor. And you know, any of these flies, you can really change the sizing and kind of the proportions if you need to. But this is a good one. I also have found if you watch damsels in the water, they kind of do this little wiggle mode as they come up. And so this microbalance damsel is really good for that because you can, if you're, let's say you were fishing with an indicator, you can actually kind of jig the indicator off the water and lower it and jig it and lower it. And that thing is going to make that similar motion. And although damsels don't move straight vertically necessarily, you'll see them more kind of working their way up. They are moving a little laterally, but vertically as well. So that's a good way that you can kind of use some jigging motion, kind of mooch it along and get that to act more like the natural damsel would act. Now, as we move our way up the water column, we've talked about 2 bead heads. We've talked about 1 non-bead head. And a number of years ago, I came across a situation where the fish were eating the damsels like right in the surface film, but not the adults. So they were eating the damsel nymphs just beneath the surface. And it was a very visual day. I could see the fish swimming and grabbing the naturals. What I found was with my unweighted flies, even those would sink a little too deeply. And I switched to a natural adult damsel pattern, and that didn't work either because the fish were not focusing on the hatched adults. They were focusing on the yet to hatch damsel nymphs. So what I did is I had a pattern that I called the Lancer damsel. It's based off of Landsiegen. It's tied in a kind of it has pheasant tail counter wrapped, kind of like his chironomid or his French chironomid. And but this is a damsel open style. I had one of those with the bead. It was doing great. Then I decided to start tying those with the foam wing case because I wanted them to float just beneath the surface. So it gave them more neutral buoyancy than anything. The nice thing about this, and I'll show you here, you'll see it has that nice little foam wing case there. And what that will do is it keeps the profile of the damsel nymph, and that foam will just cup over the back, and if you watch a damsel as it's hatching, that's the wings are obviously going to pop out of that wing case, so it gets a little gnarly. So this is kind of a bulbous little area, but the nice thing about that, you can even dab a little tiny bit of floatant on there, and that floatant will just peg that thing right in the surface film. This thing is ridiculous. So if you're fishing a damsel hatch and the fish look like they're porpoising or coming up at eating something on the surface, but they won't eat an adult, try fishing one of those in the film. You can either fish it alone or fish it maybe with another adult. Anyway, that's a very effective technique. Nothing magic about that pattern in particular, but it's designed to float really close to the surface, if not in the surface film. And lastly, the one you've all been waiting for is the Chubby Damsel. This is a great, see, this damsel is so good. This little flying ant here wants to do something to it. Get out of there, buddy. And Chubby Damsel. I love catching fish on dry flies during a damsel hatch. Fish often are a lot pickier when it comes to adults. I more than often see the fish launching themselves out of the water and catching those in the air. Unfortunately, I haven't found a pattern that does well hovering 6 inches above the surface of the water without moving. So what the Chubby Damsel does is it will allow us to create a really good damsel adult profile, but still be able to float nicely. So like the regular chubby Chernobyls, it has a little lip there of foam, and that does two things. Number one, it gives a little bit more surface area for that foam to grab and float the fly. The rest of the fly, so we've got wings, we've got legs, we've got the extended tail. Very lightweight material, so this floats great. When you add that bigger chunk of foam in the front, that puts it all together and helps that whole thing float. So besides flotation though, and this is where it's a key, you can cast that out, and if you're not getting a whole lot of interest, you can strip it. That foam front will actually sort of give a little bit of pop, and that will spit some water out. And a lot of times when those damsels are coming back to the, when they're either mating and they hit the water, they'll create some commotion, or when the females come back to lay their eggs and they start dive bombing sometimes, they're going to also create a commotion. So this is a great floating damsel adult pattern, but it also does good because it can create a little bit of commotion. So, as I said, me and my magic wand, these are 5 damsel patterns that if I'm going out during damsel season, or even now where it's not the height of damsel season, I know damsels around, these are the first 5 that I'm going to reach for in my box, at least this season. And I would recommend that you check them out. We will list the tutorials for the ones that have tutorials. The flies will be linked for the ones that are for sale. And get out there and fish yourself some damsels. Damsels crush it. Not even making that up.